From the KENNELLAND Digital Desk, I'm meteorologist Scott Muntz. This is Weather or Not, and this is the last day of 2025. Coming up in today's show, we'll talk about the fire danger that we may have. We'll say that we may have as temperatures will remain warm, well above average, especially across western, south, central South Dakota as we go over the next week to maybe 10 days. We'll have elevated fire danger, so that's something worth noting. Droughts. We'll talk about our drought conditions so far. It's something we really don't talk about in the winter months, but we'll bring it up, talk a little bit more about it, and of course, our weather pattern as we go over the next week to 2 weeks. For today, we are watching a cold front that will eventually move across eastern KENNELLAND. Should be really interesting on the timing of this front because ahead of it, we'll have temperatures that will be well above average. There's even some information that I'll show you coming up here in just a bit that we can see temperatures in the 40s for afternoon highs just ahead of that front in southeastern KENNELLAND. So that will come up, I think, after our Futurecast winds. As we ring in the new year at midnight, we'll have dry skies, but it will be cold. Northeastern South Dakota may have temperatures that fall below zero by the time we hit midnight, and then we'll slowly try to warm as we do get into tomorrow. That trend continues into Friday, and we're looking at much warmer temperatures as we get into Saturday and Sunday. So we'll have to continue to follow those temperatures as they do warm going into this coming weekend. But before then, we'll have that hit of some colder air. Now, you can see our winds will pick up from the north. Some of these wind gusts near 20, 25 miles per hour across eastern KENNELLAND. Once that happens, that'll help bring in the colder air. We'll go with relatively light wind speeds for tomorrow, and I think that trend should hold for many as we go into at least the first half of the weekend. Then they might pick up a little by the time we do get into Sunday. Now, here's a closer look at what we may see with our temperatures today. This is the short-term modeling data that we like to bring up and look at sometimes. Now, I want to bring this up because what I mentioned a little bit ago, we can see some of these temperatures here in the southeastern KENNELLAND that we can get some of those numbers maybe hitting the 40s across the southeast. Now, Sioux Falls included. That's a look at midday. Now, watch what happens as we continue through time, and we'll just go 3 hours. So from noon to 3 in the afternoon, look what happened to that temperature in Sioux Falls. It's falling to 28 degrees. And look at those numbers in the northeastern South Dakota. By the afternoon, can we get a couple of those numbers in the single digits, maybe even falling below zero by the time we hit 5 o'clock? That's trying to show up in Summit. With that to happen, I think we'll need to have clearing skies in northeastern South Dakota. So it's an interesting thing to watch as we go through the day today. Now, our official high temperature, we bumped it up. Not saying 40 in Sioux Falls, but we'll say 38. That's close. 41 in Yankton, 43 in Lake Andes, 41 in Pierre, and 52 in Rapid City. Those numbers in northeastern South Dakota remaining steady or falling once those winds become north. And then for tonight, temperatures will fall to the single digits across eastern KENNELLAND. And for tomorrow, we'll return to the 20s across the east, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Those show up in central, south central, and into western South Dakota. Coming up in our next segment, we'll talk more about the fire danger. Stay with us. You're watching Weather or Not. Welcome back to Weather or Not. Unfortunately, if you're a fan of having these warm temperatures in winter, that's great. If you're more, traditional, saying it's winter, we should see cold temperatures and snow, that's fine too. But unfortunately, we do have to talk about fire danger in the winter as well, because these temperatures will be above average on the warm side of things as we get into the first week of January, and that will introduce some high fire danger with temperatures being well above average. In fact, there's a chance that we can see 60-degree weather parts of south central South Dakota. You combine that with low humidity and any of these days where we do get strong wind, that just helps elevate the fire danger. So even though you may be in the camp saying, yeah, this is great winter weather, it does come with a price, and unfortunately, that price is high fire danger. Now, here's just a snapshot of the 7-day forecast we have for western South Dakota. Notice how those temperatures, for 6 out of the 7 days, we have numbers in the 50s, well above average. The coolest day is 44 on Friday. The warmest day is Sunday at 58, and some other computer data suggesting that we can see temperatures maybe in the 60s in parts of central South Dakota. I'm working behind the scenes here to try to bring up one of those forecasts for you, and then I'll go ahead and hit the button and show you what that is trying to show. I just put an extra letter into the identifier that we don't need. Okay, here we go. Let me go ahead and bring this up. So here's Sunday's forecast in winter, 63. Okay, well above average. It tries to cool a little bit as we do get into Monday. That's the latest forecast. The one 6 hours prior to that still has a temperature at 60 degrees. Now, that's just a sample of some of those warm temperatures that we can experience for south central to southwestern South Dakota as we go through this coming weekend and even into next week. Let me go ahead and bring that graphic back up. See how temperatures may slide a little to the lower 50s, but we're still jumping to the middle 50s by Thursday of next week. So that takes us out to January 8th. So that's something I do want to get out there. Yes, these temperatures being above average, sure, it's great, keeping some of that snow away if you're not a fan of the snow, but it does come with a price, and that price, unfortunately, is the elevated fire danger. And something that goes hand in hand with that is the drought, and that is something we'll talk more about coming up. Stay with us. You're watching Whether or Not. Welcome back to Whether or Not. It's time to talk about the drought. And Brian, I think this is something that you mentioned even yesterday during the breaks of KELOLAND this morning. Drought monitor, you really don't expect that to change when you're in December anyway. But it's something worth paying attention to.
Well, it just feeds into the story of dry weather, and western South Dakota dry land fire danger index goes up every time we're dealing with some wind and 50s and 60s for temperatures. So that is something that definitely we need to keep talking about because we're obviously not forecasting a lot of moisture in the at least the 7-day forecast.
Right. It looks to be dry. It looks to be dry as we go into that first full week of January. And you mentioned those warm temperatures. I mentioned that fire danger that we had in a couple of segments ago on Whether or Not. But Adam Rutt, I don't see him that often anymore. It's just the way the schedule works.
Right.
But he did do a story on the drought or the lack of precipitation. And what we talked about yesterday too, Brian, is how much moisture content is also in our snow. So got a lot of good information. Let's go ahead and show you what he did yesterday.
Well, we may need to start keeping an eye on the drought monitor again. Meteorologist Adam Rutt explains why.
With the several rounds of wintry weather we've seen in KELOLAND this month, you might think that we're in good shape headed into 2026 regarding soil moisture. But as Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. It's true we've seen a good amount of snow so far this winter season, especially compared to the last 2 winters we've seen. Here's a look at our snow totals as of Tuesday morning. Now let's switch that to its liquid water equivalent. So far, we've been near to below average in our sample cities. What complicates the matter is the varying liquid water ratios from one snowfall to the next. So higher totals might not equate to a lot of moisture if the snow has a low moisture content. We won't get much help as we head into the new year, as ridging aloft keeps any variety of appreciable moisture, frozen or otherwise, away from KELOLAND through at least the start of next week. As a result, we'll likely have to watch this again, the drought monitor. Southeastern KELOLAND is already under moderate drought conditions, and a prolonged lack of snow will likely make it worse by the next update. So while having the ability to avoid disruptive wintry weather is good in some regards, it's a double-edged sword sort of situation when other factors are considered. For KELOLAND Weather, I'm meteorologist Adam Rutt.
And then just piggyback on what Adam just showed us too. Here is the drought monitor. It gets assessed on Tuesdays, and the new monitor comes out on Thursday. So this will get an update for tomorrow, unless they take the New Year's Day holiday. Would they do that? I don't know.
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'll bet you they've got this all ready to go,
Okay.
automated, as trying to make things work around holidays. But you know what, Scott? As you look at this map, you got to take on one hand it's abnormally dry or moderate drought, so we're not in a huge hole here, but I can tell you, looking around my place, and maybe Lincoln County, kind of in the middle of that bullseye there in the southeast. Tile lines have dried up. They were dry last fall. And as Adam mentioned, he's right. I mean, the total amount of water with this snow, I mean, it just kind of percolates down a little bit. We have a little, of course, we have some frozen ground, but, I would say in the wintertime, obviously the authors of the Drought Monitor, they're not going to change anything probably much at all here, one way or another in January. It's usually once we start to kick up the normal precipitation patterns as we get into the longer days and the spring approaches, then this will become a bigger deal. But we're going to need some moisture. I always kind of reserve judgment, though, because patterns can often change quickly in the springtime. Last year, man, I could go off on a tangent on that. You remember how concerned we were?
Yes, until we hit, was it the first day of summer? Was it June
It was
21st?
late.
Right.
It waited.
June 21st?
It was third week of June,
Yeah,
and
I
I
think
looked
it
at that garden, and I thought, wow, it is sure dry, and it's burning up. And you just don't count on heavy rain to kick in late June and July. But last year we did, and it saved the crop locally around Sioux Falls for sure, regionally too, the pockets that were dry. So now we get to do this again. We're going to go into the spring dry unless something blockbuster comes in. But, my feeling on this, and I know it's one of those things where we can, go back and forth, but ultimately, northwest flow, until we get any sustained troughs out of the southwest, we're not going to tap Gulf moisture on any of this.
And this is early. This is December. Well, I guess January starts tomorrow. But again, you don't expect to really get out of a drought in December, January, until, like you said, you get into the spring months where we typically start to see that recharge. But I do want to point something out on the Drought Monitor, Brian, the panhandle of Nebraska. And I know on your graphics during KettleLand this morning, when you show that temperature sandwich,
Yes.
that's the area that's been warming to the 60s and 70s.
Exactly. Yep. And that's your fire danger goes from western Nebraska back toward Fort Collins, Colorado, and you go back into Colorado. They've got a lot of problems too. They're not getting snow. They're not going to get snow. Pattern's not good for that. They had wildfires last year. Western Colorado, look at that, connects to New Mexico. So that's southwest part of the country. We like all these mild days, or some of us do, but, the pattern,
Comes with the price.
It does. And that's definitely a negative. So we've got to watch that.
And if nothing changes, we'll have to watch that as we get into the spring and early summer. That's the core of the heat to our west and to our southwest for the summer months. Anyway, this is a look at the next 14 days on the European model. Keeps us, I would say, just relatively dry for the next 2 weeks, easily going into that first week of January. This is trying to extend it into the second week. And then as we do take a look at the American model, it's a little different. It tries to bring in some precipitation after that first week of the month. It's trying to bring in, maybe some snows during that time. Will be cold enough on the GFS, on the American model, to support snow. That's what it was pointing to. And if we have time, maybe I'll show that coming up in the next weather segment, Brian, what it's trying to do for a snowfall outlook. But just like yesterday, I only have that going out 7 days because it's quiet. We have that cloud saying hush, just like that book, right?
That's right.
Anyway, we'll talk more about that weather pattern coming up. Stay with us. You're watching Weather or Not. Welcome back to Whether or Not. Time to talk about this weather pattern, Brian. Almost what you see is what you get. Almost what you see is what you get. With we talked about the dry conditions and the warm temperatures. For the most part, that will continue for that first week of January.
Yeah, and we know that we're still kind of in a battle zone where we can get those dips. So that we're getting one of those, obviously, into the short-term forecast. But you look out at the pattern, it's more northwest flow, and it's dominant. It's going to continue into early January, where we have the ability to tap into more Pacific air. And as long as that regime wins the battle, then our temperatures go above normal again. And so we're kind of in that cycle. And Scott, the pattern, as amplified as that ridge is, it does tend to flatten out a little bit as we go through time. But even having said that, all that's going to do is it's going to continue to steer in Pacific air off the Rockies. So I'm not, in fact, if I look at this map, and my interpretation is into Sunday, the crest of that ridge will continue to put some pressure on temperatures. And next week, too, it's still a zonal flow from west to east. So no major systems here. We'll continue to watch the particulars on the day by day. Which days might be warmer than others, days 5 through 7. Remember, when you look at a 7-day forecast and you see highs in the 40s in Sioux Falls, you have to realize we have climatology tugging at those numbers, days 5 through 7, quite hard. Normal high is what, 28 or so?
28, 27, 28.
So that's where the number would like to be. And so when we have to say, okay, we need to warm it up, we have to go on television with a forecast that's at least 12, maybe 14 degrees above normal on those extended days. And that in and of itself is pretty significant.
Well, it's not only trying to tug that temperature down just because of the climate, but also the climate is a reflection of probably snow on the ground too.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a big starting point, because once you erase snow cover, which I got a little bit in my yard here and there.
A lot of it's piles.
But yeah, it's essentially very, very low in Sioux Falls. North and east of Sioux Falls, yes, it's going to drag down your temperature because there's more snow on the ground. And then it works the other way, western South Dakota. So yeah, as we get a better handle on snowpack, I'm sure that's going to play right into this map, that dividing line between the blues and the oranges, and then any little ripples that decide to move along that. But we were commenting, too, in the break here about how impressive this Pacific air is. Again, it just floods the plains. I know some of you are probably wondering, are we going to get windy again? And so far, not yet. I would say I kind of hold off on the big wind story.
Big wind, yeah. We could get wind gusts even today, 20, 25 miles per hour. But
normal.
The big wind, yeah.
That's normal
What you would think of a normal day in Kettleland. But the big wind, you showed that graphic yesterday of wind speeds, what they were gusting over 40 or 50. We had at least 4 of those days in December.
Yeah, and those kind of days came through with that tight battle zone between the Arctic and the Pacific air. I would say in this pattern, Scott, honestly, the Pacific air is winning out, and the Arctic air is waving the white flag here for now. I think the winter has to go back to the locker room and kind of regroup. And now we get to watch when is it going to come back? And when is that? Is that going to be the third week of January?
Will it be January at all?
Right. I mean, I don't know that we're ready to call that out. I think some of the analog years would suggest that third week of January looks a little more active. But, I can keep hitting the play button on this graphic, and this goes out January 8th, 9th, and that's a lot of mild air. And even the AI version of the European model this morning has kicked out all the way out to, it has one pretty decent front around the 9th or 10th, and it blows through, but then it just goes back to this again. So can we get some transient cold? That's the kind of, those little shocks where you get, maybe 36 hours where it's colder. I'm sure.
I mean, and that's what it seems like it's been, that these hits of cold air have come through, lasting a day, 2 days, but they've also come through with very strong wind.
Yep. And those will be the little stumbling blocks that we'll see. But, when you average that out all the way to the 15th of the month, Yeah, it's going to be above normal. Just a matter of how the math tilts and how far we weight those averages above normal. But those magenta colors, I mean, those are plus 20, plus 30 above average.
And again, it puts in account the overnight lows too.
That's right. And that's a big point of this too. When your normal low is 10 and you wake up in the morning and it's already 25 degrees or warmer, like this morning, yeah, it's pretty easy to do the math on that one. And you can easily get anomalies like this. So you're right. That's a good point because it's not just the daytime high, it's the nighttime low.
So to go along with this quiet weather to start 2026, let's go ahead and bring in some of the modeling data suggesting that, well, will we see any snow? Now, again, this is only going out to the 7th of the month, and the American model saying no, keeps everything to the north and well to the east, and the European model more or less is the same thing with quiet weather expected during that first week of the month, and for some of us, we might even be able to extend that going into the second week of January. And it got me thinking about this too, Brian. Could this be a bookend winter? We get snow at the beginning, nothing in the middle, maybe snow at the end. Now, it's a little early maybe to say that, but just to throw it out there.
Okay. How about your opinions on the cycle that we're establishing?
See, now, remember, we've talked about that going back to November and how it likes to reset.
Right.
In December, the solstice, more or less, is kind of what we agreed on. And we had a lot of examples on cycles that we were watching during the fall going into the early winter. And then it kicked out that one with the closed low. Remember, we were following that. That happened 3 times, I think, in that cycle until we hit December. Then I don't think it happened in December.
No. And now, as you said, that now we're reestablishing some or establishing a new set of cycles and things to watch. So the pattern, the upper air patterns right now, yeah, they're going to be kicking out northwest flow for now. And I think it'll be an interesting year. It always is. Weather's different every year, never the same.
Which is nice. Keeps us on our toes, right?
Learning and going ahead. That's right.
That's our time for this latest edition of Whether or Not. Thank you for joining us, and have yourself a great day and have yourself a great new year.